Could you tell us the difference between nnet1, nnet2, and nnet3?
Okay, yeah, okay. So all of these things are, first I want to say all of these things are a little bit old-fashioned now. Now everyone uses something like PyTorch or TensorFlow, but these are still, nnet3 is still part of the current Kaldi recipes, and a lot of people still use those because when the amount of data is relatively small, it's really hard to beat the standard Kaldi recipe. So nnet1 is a kind of a basic neural net toolkit that was mostly written by Karel Vesely originally. Uh, uh, and it's not based on tensors. It's slightly more basic. It's based on matrices and stuff. And it supported things like convolutional neural nets and feed-forward components, things like that, and LSTMs. nnet2 and nnet3 were both written by me. nnet3 is like the more up-to-date version. It's after a big refactoring. The way I want to talk about nnet3 mostly. So the way nnet3 works is very different from the way most neural net stuff works, because the way things are computed is automatically figured out by the framework itself. So in things like PyTorch, you have to decide how to lay out everything in memory. And if you're doing, let's say, a convolutional network, you explicitly say, oh, here's a convolution with certain stride and a certain kernel size, things like that. The way it works in nnet3 is a little bit different, that instead of, to express a convolution, instead of talking about a stride and dilation, you talk about it in terms of concatenating the input with certain time offsets. And there's an explicit notion of time. It's like its own index. And then there's this compilation process that you, let's suppose you have a certain length of input. You have to figure out yourself like what time indexes you want the output on, and you decide like how much you increase the time index by each time. It could be 3 each time. And then you tell the framework which time indexes you want the output. And then it figures out which of all the intermediate layers is needed on which time steps. So it turned out to be hard to fully maintain with the latest versions of NVIDIA's runtime. The issue basically is that it's a layout problem. That the fastest convolutional code in NVIDIA's CUDA library assumes a layout, I think NCHW. So N is the batch index, C is the channel, H and W are height and width. So in a 1D convolution, it would be, I think, just NCH. So the issue is that the way the whole compilation framework works in nnet3 is it kind of assumes that the H, let's suppose the H corresponds to the time index. It kind of assumes that the H has the largest stride, which would correspond to like a different layout. It would be like H N something. Anyway, the problem is it's not really possible to use the latest convolutional code. So it's just not ideal. Now,
Okay.
yeah.
Could you also explain why do we need time delay in our neural network?
Okay, so ultimately this time delay part, it's a different name for a convolutional neural network. So at the time I created this, then people did already know the name convolutional neural network, but the thing is, in the speech community, the name that had been given to this stuff was time delay neural network. And Alex Weibel, who came up with that name, I think he claims that they just renamed the stuff in the image community and it became convolutional. I don't know whether they just invented it separately or something, but I felt that just out of respect to that tradition in the speech community, I would keep that name. But really, most people know it now as convolutional.
Okay,